Imagine standing in front of a vending machine with 20 different options. You panic and immediately press the first button you see without looking at what else is available. That stale bag of pretzels drops down and you're stuck with it. This is level 0 timing, collapsing your wave function before exploring what's possible. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superposition, meaning they're in multiple states at once until someone observes them. The moment you measure, all the possibilities collapse into one reality. Your life operates on this same principle. Every opportunity, every path forward exists as a cloud of potential until you force a premature decision. This happens when someone receives a job offer on Monday and accepts it by Tuesday morning without waiting. It sounds decisive, but it's actually destructive. By Wednesday, 2 better offers might arrive, but the commitment is already made. The quantum state collapsed prematurely. All other possibilities died in that moment of rushed observation. At level 0, you see one option and grab it out of fear that waiting means losing everything. You don't realize that potential is a quantum field. It needs time to evolve, to show you patterns invisible in the first moment. Think about how venture capitalists evaluate startups. They don't decide in the first meeting. They let possibilities breathe, watching how the superposition evolves over weeks or months. Level 1 represents slight improvement. Here, you acknowledge multiple paths might exist, but you still think in binary terms. It's like knowing the vending machine has other snacks, but believing you must choose one category forever. I'm either a doctor or I'm nothing. This relationship works or I'm alone forever. Single timeline thinking dominates every decision. Consider the musician who sees only 2 paths: viral success or complete failure. When the first album doesn't explode, they quit entirely. What they miss is the superposition, teaching while creating, building slowly, collaborating in unexpected ways. They force a binary measurement on a quantum possibility space that actually contains infinite pathways. The tragedy of levels 0 and 1 is becoming a premature observer of your own life. In quantum physics, observation fundamentally changes reality. When you check something too soon, you alter what it could have become. Think of Schrödinger's famous cat thought experiment. The cat exists in superposition, both alive and dead, until you open the box. Your dreams, potential, and opportunities exist in that same suspended state of infinite possibility. But at these early levels, you keep opening boxes too soon. You check business results after 1 week and decide it's failing. You go on 3 dates and declare you'll never find love. You try a new skill for a month and call yourself untalented. Each premature observation collapses a wave function that needed more time to evolve into something remarkable. The universe operates on quantum time, not anxious, ego-driven time. Particles don't rush their superposition. They exist in all states simultaneously, patiently, until the right moment of measurement naturally arrives. But most people frantically collapse possibilities like children shaking wrapped presents, destroying the mystery before it can reveal its true nature. The cost is staggering. Every early collapse removes entire branches from your probability tree. Picture a massive oak tree where each branch represents a possible future. At level 0, you're taking a chainsaw to it, leaving yourself with a single bare trunk. At level 1, you're slightly better. You leave 2 branches, but you're still eliminating entire forests of possibility that could have grown. The irony cuts deep. The people you admire most, those who seem blessed with perfect timing or impossible luck, aren't collapsing their wave functions prematurely. They're letting possibilities breathe and evolve. They're comfortable with superposition, with the profound discomfort of, I don't know yet. They understand that quantum timing requires patience with uncertainty. Here's the fundamental lesson. Stop being a premature observer of your own potential. When you feel the desperate urge to decide, to commit, to collapse into certainty, pause. Ask yourself this critical question. Am I observing this because it's genuinely time, or because I'm terrified of holding multiple possibilities in suspension? Your honest answer reveals exactly which level you're operating from and what's really driving your timing decisions. Imagine trying to hear a beautiful melody while someone bangs pots and pans around you. Eventually, you can't hear the music anymore, not because it stopped playing, but because noise drowned it out completely. That's decoherence, and it's destroying your timing at level 2. In quantum physics, decoherence happens when a quantum system interacts with its environment and loses its quantum properties. A particle in superposition, existing in multiple states simultaneously, starts interacting with air molecules, photons, heat, and other particles. These environmental interactions cause the delicate quantum state to collapse into ordinary classical behavior. The quantum magic simply disappears. Your intentions and goals work exactly the same way. You might wake up at 3 a.m. with a crystal clear vision for starting a business. The mission feels powerful, the strategy seems obvious, the potential looks limitless. Your quantum state is perfectly coherent, all your possibilities aligned in beautiful superposition. Then morning arrives and reality intrudes. A parent calls asking when you'll get a real job. Friends laugh about another startup idea. A partner sighs about needing more stability. Each conversation acts like an environmental particle, colliding with your coherent intention. By noon, your quantum state has completely decohered. The vision that felt revolutionary now feels foolish, naive, impossible to achieve. This is level 2. You've learned not to collapse your own wave function prematurely. That lesson from level 01 is integrated. But you haven't learned to isolate your quantum states from environmental noise. Every opinion, every doubt, every sideways glance from strangers interferes with your coherence. You leak potential into the environment like heat escaping through cracks in a window. The mechanism is subtle but deadly. In quantum systems, decoherence doesn't happen instantly. It's gradual deterioration. Each environmental interaction steals a bit of coherence until quantum behavior completely vanishes. You don't consciously notice you're changing your mind. You just feel energy draining away, certainty fading, possibilities blurring into confusion. Level 3 is where you recognize the decoherence problem, but still can't solve it effectively. You understand that external voices are interfering with your timing, but you haven't built proper isolation systems. It's like knowing you need a quiet room to hear delicate music, but you keep leaving all the windows and doors wide open. At this level, people know they need isolation. They've read about it, understand it intellectually, talk about boundaries. But when criticism arrives, they still explain themselves, still defend their choices, still let environmental particles penetrate their quantum system. What they don't understand is that explanation itself creates decoherence. The moment you start justifying your quantum state to the environment, you're entangling with forces that will collapse your possibilities. Consider how quantum computers are built. Scientists invest billions creating conditions approaching absolute zero temperature in vacuum chambers with sophisticated isolation technology. Why such extreme measures? Because even a single photon hitting the wrong way causes decoherence. Even thermal vibrations can destroy the entire computation. The quantum state is that delicate and that powerful. Your dreams and goals are quantum computers running in your consciousness. And most people are operating them in a room full of doubters throwing opinions like baseballs at a glass structure. The social environment represents the worst culprit. Humans are social particles, constantly exchanging information, emotions, and judgments. We evolved to maintain coherence with our tribe because isolation meant death on the ancient savannah. But in the modern world, where your biggest opportunities require holding states the tribe doesn't understand, social coherence becomes social decoherence. Fitting in means giving up quantum potential. Here's what environmental interference looks like in daily life. You wake up excited about your project. You check social media. Decoherence begins immediately. You see someone doing something similar but better. More interference enters your system. You read news about economic uncertainty. your possibility wave scatters. You attend a family gathering where everyone asks about your real plans, complete decoherence. By bedtime, you don't even remember why you felt excited that morning. The environment didn't destroy your dream through one dramatic collapse. It eroded your quantum coherence through 1,000 tiny interactions, each one stealing a little bit of possibility, until your quantum state became classical, mundane, realistic, and completely ordinary. At level 3, you start building protective walls, but they're made of paper. You tell yourself you won't care what people think, but you still listen intently. You try to protect your vision, but you keep sharing it with people who don't have the consciousness to hold it. You haven't learned the fundamental quantum principle yet. Isolation isn't optional or nice to have. It's the absolute prerequisite for coherence. The path forward requires understanding something deeply counterintuitive. You cannot simultaneously exist in superposition and maintain constant contact with a decohering environment. You must choose. Perfect quantum timing requires deliberate periods of isolation where your possibilities can remain coherent, where your wave function can evolve without interference, where you can finally hear your own signal above the relentless noise of others' limitations. There's a fascinating phenomenon in quantum physics called the quantum Zeno effect. If you continuously measure a quantum system, you literally prevent it from evolving. Watch a pot constantly, and it never boils, not just metaphorically, but actually at the quantum level. Continuous observation freezes change itself. Welcome to level 4, where you've become your own worst enemy through excessive measurement. Consider someone who starts a YouTube channel and commits to giving it 6 months. Sounds disciplined and strategic, right? Except they check analytics 17 times daily. Subscribers, watch time, click-through rate, audience retention, demographics. Every hour brings another measurement, and every measurement collapses a possibility that needed more time to develop. Here's the quantum truth. Growth is fundamentally a quantum process. When you plant a seed, magic happens underground, in darkness, completely unmeasured. The moment you dig it up to check if roots are growing, you kill the plant. This person is digging up their channel's roots every single day, wondering why nothing grows. By month 3, the channel dies, not because the content was inadequate, but because it was measured to death. Each time they checked and saw small numbers, they collapsed the wave function into, "This isn't working." Each observation reinforced that exact reality through the observer effect. They created a quantum Zeno effect on their own success, literally freezing growth through constant measurement. This is the measurement paradox. You need feedback to adjust and improve, but too much observation kills the organic process. It's like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can know a particle's position or its momentum precisely, but never both simultaneously. You can measure your current results or maintain your momentum toward the future, but doing both at once collapses the possibility space you need. At level 4, you think you're being smart and data-driven by tracking everything obsessively. You've read about metrics, KPIs, and data-driven decisions. You measure your workouts, productivity, relationships, creative output, learning progress. You turn every aspect of life into numbers and dashboards. And in doing so, you systematically suck the quantum magic out of life itself. The problem isn't measurement itself, it's the frequency and the focus. You're checking wrong things at wrong times. You're observing effects when you should observe causes. You're measuring outcomes when the quantum state is still forming in the invisible realm. Level 5 presents an even more insidious problem. Here you measure at reasonable frequency, but in completely the wrong basis. In quantum mechanics, measurement basis matters enormously. You can measure a particle's spin on the x-axis, y-axis, or z-axis. Each basis reveals different information and collapses different possibilities into reality. Measure on the wrong basis, and you destroy the very information you actually needed. Think about someone measuring their business rigorously every week. Revenue, profit, growth rate, margins. Every metric perfectly tracked. The business fails anyway. Why? They measured in the wrong basis entirely. They needed to measure customer delight, product market resonance, team energy, innovation velocity, the quantum states that precede revenue by months. By the time money becomes measurable, the underlying wave function has already collapsed into failure or success. Wrong basis measurement is everywhere once you see it. You measure weight when you should measure energy levels. You measure follower count when you should measure creative flow state. You measure relationship stability when you should measure authentic connection depth. You're taking spin measurements on the x-axis when the particle is quantum entangled on the y-axis. The data you get is real, but completely useless for the outcome you want. The tragedy is that these wrong measurements feel incredibly productive. You have dashboards, spreadsheets, tracking apps, weekly reviews. You feel like you're in control of your destiny. But you're like a scientist measuring a quantum computer with metal rulers and thermometers. You're getting data, but the measurement instruments themselves are destroying the computation you're trying to understand. Here's what observer effect failures look like in practice. The student who checks their grade portal obsessively and loses all focus on actual learning. The entrepreneur who watches competitor metrics constantly instead of building something unique. The artist who counts likes and followers instead of cultivating craft and authentic voice. Each measurement fundamentally changes what they're capable of becoming. The quantum world offers a profound lesson here. Some processes only work when you're not watching them. Quantum tunneling, a particle passing through an energy barrier that should be impossible, has higher probability when you're not continuously measuring it. Your personal breakthroughs work exactly the same way. They need darkness, privacy, and unmeasured space to occur. At levels 4 and 5, you must learn the sophisticated art of strategic ignorance. Not irresponsible avoidance or denial, but conscious, intentional non-observation. You need to measure just enough to navigate intelligently, but not so much that you freeze evolution itself. You need to choose your measurement basis with extreme care, understanding that what you observe literally shapes what becomes possible. The masters of perfect timing don't track everything obsessively, they track the right things at the right frequency and the right basis. They understand that some processes need darkness to develop. Some growth must happen unmeasured. Some possibilities need to remain in superposition far longer than anxiety wants to allow. The path forward: decide with precision what you're measuring, why you're measuring it, and how often. Then develop the discipline to look away, to let the quantum process evolve naturally, to trust the wave function to develop in its own time without your anxious interference. In 1935, Einstein called it spooky action at a distance and thought it proved quantum mechanics was incomplete. Two quantum particles become entangled, and when you change one, the other changes instantly, even if they're on opposite sides of the universe. No signal passes between them, no time delay. Instantaneous correlation that defies everything classical physics taught us. Your timing isn't isolated. Neither is anyone else's. We're all entangled in invisible quantum networks, and at level 6, you finally start seeing this reality. Consider someone who spends 3 months building an online course in complete isolation, carefully protecting it from decoherence like we discussed earlier. Smart approach, right? They launched to absolute silence. 0 sales, 0 interest. Complete failure. What they missed, they weren't entangled with anyone. They built in a vacuum, never creating the quantum connections that make launches actually work. Level 6 is where you discover that perfect timing isn't just about managing your internal quantum state. It's fundamentally about your entanglement with the systems around you. When you act, you don't just collapse your own wave function. You send ripples through every system you're quantum connected to. Think about why some people's social media posts go viral while identical content from others disappears into obscurity. It's not just the content quality, it's the entanglement structure. The person who goes viral is quantum entangled with a network. Their observation becomes everyone's observation through the entanglement. Their wave function collapse triggers cascading collapses throughout their entire network. This is quantum entanglement in social systems. When you're properly connected to others, your timing affects their timing. Your decisions influence their possibilities. Your wave function collapse can trigger their collapse or their expansion into new coherent states. But here's where it gets interesting. Entanglement isn't about having more connections or bigger networks. It's about having the right quantum correlations. You can have 10,000 social media followers and 0 real entanglement. Or you can have 15 deeply connected people and be so profoundly entangled that when you move, entire systems respond. At level 6, you start consciously recognizing these entanglements. You notice that certain people's energy directly affects your timing. When you talk to one person, opportunities suddenly materialize. When you avoid another person, everything stagnates. These aren't coincidences or mystical phenomena, they're quantum correlations. You're entangled with these people, and the entanglement affects the probability distribution of your outcomes. Level 7 is where you learn to leverage this phenomenon deliberately and strategically. Remember Einstein's spooky action at a distance? It happens because entangled particles don't just communicate, they share a quantum state. They're not two separate things sending signals. They're one unified system, expressing itself in two locations. When you're truly entangled with someone, you and they form a single quantum system that transcends physical separation. Think about business partners who seem impossibly synchronized. One gets an idea across the country. The other starts executing it before any message is sent. Not because they're psychic or mystical, but because they share a coherent quantum state. Their possibility waves have interfered so many times, so deeply, that they've become one wave function expressing itself through two separate people. This is level 7 timing, orchestrating entanglement with intention. You don't just passively recognize connections, you cultivate them strategically. You understand that who you entangle with determines what timings become available to you. Your quantum network is your destiny. Here's how entanglement actually works. Every interaction represents a potential entanglement. Shallow interactions create weak entanglement, minimal correlation, no spooky action. Deep interactions create strong entanglement, high correlation, significant non-local effects. Most people waste their time on shallow interactions, then wonder why nothing synchronizes in their life. The masters do something fundamentally different. They go deep with few people. They create strong quantum correlations. They build entanglement so powerful that timing becomes truly non-local. When one person in the network finds an opportunity, everyone else suddenly sees related opportunities. When one person solves a problem, everyone else's similar problems mysteriously shift. This explains why certain groups seem impossibly lucky over decades. The PayPal Mafia, Renaissance artist workshops, Silicon Valley networks. These weren't just friend groups or professional associations. They were quantum-entangled systems where each person's timing directly affected everyone else's possibilities through invisible quantum correlations. But entanglement has a shadow side worth understanding. You can be entangled with people whose wave functions are collapsing into failure, limitation, and suffering. Their observation of impossibility becomes your impossibility. Their decoherence directly causes your decoherence. You feel their timing problems as your own because, at the quantum level, you're genuinely not separate beings. At level 7, you become ruthlessly intentional about entanglement. You recognize that some connections strengthen your quantum state, while others systematically weaken it. You understand that physical proximity isn't entanglement. You can be next to someone daily with 0 quantum correlation. And you can be continents apart from someone you're deeply entangled with. The practical application: build your quantum network deliberately and consciously. Seek people whose wave functions complement yours, whose timing correlates with the timing you want to create. Spend deep, coherent time with them. Create shared states, shared visions, shared possibilities that entangle your quantum systems. And when you act, remember, you're never acting alone. Every move you make sends information through your entanglement network instantly. Perfect timing at this level means understanding that your moment to act might be triggered by someone else's observation, someone else's collapse, someone else's emergence, even if they're halfway around the world and you never spoke that day. A quantum particle doesn't choose between being here or there. It exists in both locations simultaneously, each with its own probability amplitude. Only when measured does it choose one position. Until that measurement moment, it's genuinely in superposition, not undecided, but multiply decided at once. At level 8, you finally learn to live in conscious superposition. Consider someone building 3 businesses simultaneously. Their friends think they're unfocused, scattered, afraid of commitment. These observers don't understand quantum timing at all. This person isn't trying to do 3 things badly. They're maintaining coherent superposition, keeping 3 probability amplitudes alive until the right moment of observation naturally emerges. Here's what makes this approach work. While all 3 businesses exist in superposition, they interfere with each other constantly. A lesson from business. A suddenly solves a problem in business C. A connection from business B opens unexpected doors for business A. The businesses aren't separate ventures, they're different expressions of one unified wave function, interfering constructively. This is the secret that level 05 people never grasp. Keeping options open isn't weakness or indecision. It's quantum mechanics. The most powerful state isn't premature commitment to one path. It's coherent superposition of multiple paths, each amplifying the others through quantum interference. In quantum physics, particles in superposition take all paths simultaneously. In the famous double-slit experiment, a single photon goes through both slits at once, interfering with itself. This self-interference creates patterns that are literally impossible if the photon chose one slit or the other. The pattern proves superposition is real. Your life works on this same principle. When you maintain superposition, keeping multiple projects, identities, possibilities alive, they interfere with each other. Sometimes destructively, they cancel out, but often constructively, they amplify each other in unexpected ways. Level 8 is about maintaining this superposition without decoherence. It requires enormous skill and consciousness. You need enough coherence in each state to keep it viable, enough separation to prevent premature collapse, and enough awareness to recognize when constructive interference is happening. Think about someone who's simultaneously a writer, consultant, and teacher. Everyone tells them to pick one thing and focus, but they understand superposition at a deep level. Their consulting gives them stories to write. Their writing attracts consulting clients. Their teaching clarifies their thinking for both. They're not scattered. They're in coherent superposition. And the interference patterns are creating opportunities impossible from any single path. But level 8 has a significant challenge. You can maintain superposition successfully, but you can't yet control the interference patterns. Sometimes your paths amplify each other beautifully. Sometimes they cancel out frustratingly. You're surfing the quantum waves, but not yet conducting them like a maestro. Level 9 is where you become the interference engineer. In quantum computing, the entire computational power comes from interference. You set up quantum states so they interfere constructively toward the answer you want, and destructively toward the answers you don't want. You're orchestrating probability amplitudes like a conductor orchestrating a symphony, every element positioned to create the exact resonance pattern you need. This is advanced quantum timing. You're not just maintaining multiple possibilities, you're deliberately arranging them so they interfere in your favor. Consider someone operating at level 9. They maintain 6 different projects in superposition. But here's the critical difference. They designed these projects to interfere constructively. They're building an audience while developing a product, while forming partnerships, while learning new skills. And each element amplifies the others in precise, intentional ways when their audience asks questions. Those questions directly guide product development. When they develop the product, they document the process, which grows their audience. When they form partnerships, those partnerships accelerate both product and audience. The interference is constructive because it was designed that way from the beginning. This requires understanding wave interference principles deeply. In physics, waves interfere constructively when their peaks align perfectly and destructively when peaks meet troughs. Your projects, relationships, and possibilities work identically. Constructive interference happens when timing naturally aligns, learning to code while building an app, dating while healing from past relationships, building a business while developing a personal brand. The peaks reinforce each other, creating amplification. Destructive interference happens when timing creates conflict, starting a business while in relationship crisis, learning new skills while in survival mode, building an audience while hiding your real self. The waves cancel out, creating stagnation. Level 9 operators design their superposition states for maximum constructive interference. They don't just keep options open randomly. They architect option sets that amplify each other systematically. They understand that 3 well-chosen projects can create 9 opportunities if the interference is right, or 0 opportunities if the interference is wrong. The practical application is profound. Instead of asking, "What should I focus on?" you ask, "What set of simultaneous paths would constructively interfere?" Instead of eliminating options to find focus, arrange them for amplification through interference. But here's the quantum truth that makes or breaks this level. This only works if you maintain genuine coherence. Superposition with decoherence is just distraction and scattered energy. Superposition with coherence is exponential power. Each of your possibilities must be real, invested in, energized, not just vague maybes or backup plans. At level 9, you're playing quantum chess with reality itself. Every move exists in superposition until you need to commit. Every path amplifies other paths through designed interference. And when the moment comes to collapse into decisive action, you're not choosing between weak options. You're selecting from a set of possibilities that have been amplifying each other all along, creating momentum impossible from any single timeline. In classical physics, if you don't have enough energy to get over a wall, you're stuck. Simple. The math is clear. But quantum mechanics completely breaks this rule. Particles can tunnel through energy barriers they shouldn't be able to cross. They don't climb over. They probabilistically appear on the other side, as if the barrier wasn't there. This is perhaps the most mind-bending quantum phenomenon, and at level 10, you start recognizing it in your own life. Consider someone who's an assistant with no connections, no credentials, no obvious path to their dream role. The barrier seems impossible. They'd need 10 years of experience, an MBA, and deep industry relationships. Classical physics says they're stuck at the bottom, and logic agrees. But quantum tunneling offers a different path. Instead of trying to climb the barrier traditionally, this person looks for the quantum path through it. They find a probability window, a startup CEO who values raw talent over credentials. The barrier's thickness is thin there. They position themselves at that barrier point repeatedly, increasing their probability amplitude. One day they tunnel through, from assistant to VP, impossibly fast by classical standards. This wasn't luck or privilege. It was quantum mechanics applied to career timing. Tunneling works because particles aren't localized points. They're probability waves. The wave extends into and through barriers, even barriers higher than the particle's available energy. Most of the time, the particle bounces back, but sometimes, with small but non-zero probability, it appears on the other side. Your life has the same structure. Every impossible barrier has a non-zero probability of being tunneled. The job you're not qualified for, the relationship that seems out of your league, the business success that requires resources you don't have. Classical thinking says these are impossible. Quantum thinking says they're improbable but achievable through tunneling. At level 10, you start seeing tunneling opportunities everywhere. You recognize that barriers aren't solid walls, they're probability distributions. Some parts are thick, low tunneling probability. Some parts are thin, higher probability. And some parts have resonance conditions, very high probability. The key is understanding three factors that affect tunneling probability. First, barrier thickness. A thin barrier is easier to tunnel through than a thick one. In quantum physics, this is literal distance. In life, it's the number of requirements between you and the goal. A barrier with 15 requirements is much thicker than a barrier with 3 requirements. Level 10 operators look for thin parts of barriers. Second, barrier height. The energy difference between your current state and the desired state. Lower barriers tunnel easier. If you're trying to go from 0 to billionaire, that's an enormous barrier height. But 0 to 6-figure creator? Much lower barrier, much higher tunneling probability. Third, and most important, your wave function's amplitude at the barrier. This is how often you show up at the barrier, how much energy you direct toward it. In quantum physics, particles that repeatedly interact with a barrier increase their tunneling probability. In life, people who repeatedly position themselves at the opportunity edge dramatically increase their breakthrough probability. Level 11 is where you learn to engineer tunneling conditions deliberately. Think about how radioactive decay works. Particles inside atomic nuclei are trapped by enormous energy barriers. Classical physics says they should stay trapped forever, but they tunnel out and we can predict the probability. Why? Because physicists understand the barrier structure completely. At level 11, you do the same thing with life barriers. You analyze the barrier structure, identify thin points, create resonance conditions, and massively increase your tunneling probability. Here's a real-world example. Someone wants to break into an elite industry with gatekeepers. Classical approach says, get credentials, pay dues, climb slowly. Quantum approach says, find where the barrier is thinnest. Maybe there's a new technology the old guard doesn't understand. Maybe there's a geographic market being ignored. Maybe there's a customer segment being underserved. These thin points exist because the barrier isn't uniform. Every established system has cracks, edges, and weak points where tunneling probability spikes. Level 11 operators find these points systematically, but tunneling has a critical requirement. You must maintain your wave function at the barrier. In quantum physics, a particle that never interacts with the barrier never tunnels through. In life, you must repeatedly position yourself at the edge of possibility, not recklessly, but consistently. This means applying for roles you're not qualified for, reaching out to people out of your league, pitching ideas that seem too ambitious. Each interaction is like a particle hitting the barrier. Most times nothing happens, but your wave function is penetrating into the barrier, building amplitude on the other side. The mathematics of tunneling reveals something profound. Tunneling probability drops exponentially with barrier thickness, but never reaches 0. This means even seemingly impossible goals have non-zero probability. The question isn't, can I tunnel through, but how can I increase my tunneling probability? The practical application. Stop thinking about climbing over barriers through classical paths. Start looking for tunneling opportunities, thin points, resonance conditions, probability windows. Position yourself at these barriers repeatedly. Maintain your wave function amplitude through consistent presence. And here's the quantum secret that changes everything. Sometimes the barrier collapses entirely while you're tunneling. You show up at an opportunity edge repeatedly, and suddenly the entire structure shifts. The company changes its hiring requirements. The industry has a paradigm shift. The relationship possibility opens unexpectedly. You weren't climbing over. You were there when the barrier thickness suddenly dropped to 0. At levels 10-11, you're operating in the realm where impossible becomes improbable. and improbable becomes inevitable through quantum probability mechanics. You're not relying on luck. You're engineering the conditions for probabilistic breakthroughs that look like magic to everyone else. There's a state in quantum mechanics called an eigenstate, a state where a quantum system is perfectly aligned with what you're measuring. When a particle is in an eigenstate of energy, you get a precise energy reading with 100% probability. No uncertainty. Perfect alignment between the system and observation. Level 12 is becoming an eigenstate of timing itself. At this level, you're not just using quantum principles, you've become a quantum system operating in perfect coherence with reality. You're orchestrating collapse, superposition, and entanglement in seamless harmony. You're the conductor of your own quantum symphony. What does this actually look like? It's the ability to know when to observe and when to let evolve, when to entangle and when to decouple, when to collapse into action and when to maintain superposition. These decisions aren't made through logic. They emerge from a deep resonance with the quantum nature of timing itself. Think about the greatest breakthrough moments in history. They don't come from forcing or planning. They come from perfect alignment, being in the right state at the right time, with the right level of coherence, entangled with the right systems, measuring in the right basis. It looks like luck or genius, but it's quantum mechanics at its finest. Level 12 timing has several characteristics. First, you maintain maximum coherence while staying open to the environment. This seems contradictory. We talked about isolation preventing decoherence. But at level 12, you've developed such strong internal coherence that you can interact with the environment without losing your quantum state. It's like a quantum computer that can operate at room temperature, something current technology can't do, but future systems will achieve. Second, you hold superposition effortlessly. Multiple projects, identities, possibilities exist simultaneously without internal conflict. You're not struggling to keep options open. They exist naturally as expressions of your wave function. And they interfere constructively without conscious effort because you've designed your life as an interference engine. Third, your entanglements are precisely calibrated. You're deeply connected to systems that amplify your timing and completely decoupled from systems that would cause decoherence. You can sense quantum correlations before they're obvious, positioning yourself in networks where your timing and others' timing will synchronize perfectly. Fourth, you measure in the perfect basis at the perfect frequency. You're not over-observing or under-observing. You're not tracking vanity metrics or ignoring important signals. Your measurement collapses exactly the right aspects of your wave function at exactly the right moments, while leaving other aspects in productive superposition. Fifth, and most remarkably, you've developed an intuition for tunneling opportunities. You can sense when barrier thickness is dropping, when resonance conditions are emerging, when probability windows are opening. You position yourself at these points without conscious analysis. It's become second nature. But here's what really defines level 12. You've stopped fighting quantum mechanics. Early levels are about learning the rules. Middle levels are about applying them. Level 12 is about embodying them so completely that there's no separation between you and the principles. You don't use quantum timing. You are quantum timing. This manifests in what people call flow states, or being in the zone, but it's deeper than that. It's operating as a coherent quantum system in a quantum universe. Decisions emerge from superposition naturally. Actions happen at precisely the right moment without conscious calculation. Opportunities appear through entanglement before you could have logically predicted them, the practical reality of level 12. You stop experiencing timing as something you have to manage. It becomes something you embody. The question shifts from when should I act to simply acting when the wave function naturally collapses. There's no gap between recognition and response. Consider how masters in any field operate. They don't think through every move. They respond from a place of integrated knowledge. A jazz musician doesn't calculate which note comes next. They feel the music's wave function and collapse it into sound. A chess grandmaster doesn't analyze every possibility consciously. They sense the position's quantum state and move from there. Level 12 timing works the same way. You've internalized quantum principles so deeply that they've become your operating system. You don't apply techniques. You exist as the technique itself. This level also brings profound responsibility. When you're operating as a coherent quantum system, your collapses affect everyone entangled with you. Your timing decisions ripple through your entire network instantly. You become a timing beacon. People synchronize with you without knowing why. This is why level 12 operators often seem to create entire movements or industries. They're not just succeeding individually. They're collapsing wave functions for entire entangled systems. When they act, they create cascading probability shifts for everyone connected to them. But here's what prevents most people from reaching level 12. They think it's a destination. It's not. It's a state of continuous coherence that must be maintained. You can drop out of level 12 instantly through decoherence, wrong measurements, or poor entanglement choices. The difference is that at level 12, you recognize decoherence immediately and restore coherence quickly. The path to level 12 isn't through mastering more techniques. It's through progressively removing everything that prevents natural quantum operation. It's subtractive, not additive. You're not adding skills. You're removing interference with your natural quantum nature. Early levels add knowledge. Learn about superposition. Understand entanglement. Middle levels add practice. Maintain coherence. Design interference patterns. Level 12 removes everything artificial until only pure quantum timing remains. Think about water flowing downhill. It doesn't calculate the path. It follows the energy gradient naturally. At level 12, you're like water, following probability gradients with zero resistance. You don't force timing, you allow it. You don't create opportunities. You recognize when probability amplitudes are already aligned. This sounds passive, but it's not. It's profoundly active in a quantum way. You're constantly collapsing, measuring, entangling, and maintaining superposition, but from a place of alignment rather than effort. It's the difference between swimming against a current and surfing a wave. Both require skill and energy, but one works with natural forces while the other fights them. The final characteristic of level 12, perfect alignment with uncertainty. At early levels, uncertainty feels threatening, something to eliminate or manage. At level 12, you recognize uncertainty as the quantum substrate of possibility. You're not trying to make everything certain. You're maintaining the precise amount of uncertainty needed for quantum effects to operate. This is the deepest paradox. Perfect timing comes from perfect comfort with imperfect knowledge. You act decisively without needing complete information. You commit fully while maintaining superposition. You're certain and uncertain simultaneously, an eigenstate of both states at once. In quantum mechanics, eigenstates are the only states where measurement gives a definite result. When you become an eigenstate of timing, every moment gives you definite clarity about what to do next, not through analysis, but through alignment. The universe's timing and your timing become the same timing. This is what people sense in true masters. It's not that they're smarter or luckier. It's that they've achieved quantum coherence with reality itself. Their personal wave function and the universal wave function are entangled so deeply that they're essentially one system. The ultimate lesson of level 12, you don't have timing, you are timing. And when you fully embody this truth, perfect alignment isn't something you achieve occasionally. It's something you exist as continuously, a living expression of quantum mechanics operating through human consciousness. This is where the journey through all 12 levels leads, not to a technique you use, but to a state you become. Not to controlling timing, but to being timing itself. Not to mastering quantum mechanics, but to recognizing you've always been a quantum system that just needed to remember how to operate according to your true nature.